Welcome everyone to the weekly Chabura. This week the Chabura is a few days earlier than normal. I'm doing it on a Tuesday because I also have a Chabura tomorrow regarding Hanukkah, on the Inyani Hanukkah, on the Nisim, and the other special things that we must know about when it comes to the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. So today I'm actually doing the Parsha of the week, Parshas Vayeshev, and Emet Hashem tomorrow, Bli Neder, we will be doing the Chabura on Hanukkah. Before I begin, like I always do, I'd like to thank Chazaq and Torah Anytime for everything that they do for the Klal. Hashem should reward them with continued success and continued marbin, being marbit's Torah barabim. I also want to dedicate this particular shiur, this Parshas Vayeshev Chabura, to a very special friend of mine, Rev Mati and Mrs. Gans, for everything that they do for the Klal, for all the avodas hakodesh they do, for all the chesed they do, for all the wonderful programs that they're involved in. Thank you for that. Now, before we start Parshas Vayeshev, last week I actually forgot to mention in Parshas Vayeshev something very powerful that I really wanted it to be the most important aspect of my shiur, and I got so caught up with so many other wonderful divrei Torah that I actually left it out. So I actually just want to start with that, and then we will go into the story that I always like to say, a story I like to say before I begin all my lectures, just in case somebody doesn't have the time, is not interested to listen to a 30-minute shiur on the Parsha. At least he'll get a beautiful, inspirational story. So from last week's Parsha, Yaakov had a battle with the Malach. And we do know that the Malach, they were fighting between each other, and we know it wasn't just a physical fight, it was more of a spiritual fight. And Yaakov needed to know the name of the Malach, and the Malach said, why are you asking me? But anyway, towards the end of the battle, before the Malach said, I need to go up and say Shira, he tells Yaakov that Yaakov said, Barchein, bless me. So the Malach said like this, Vayomer, and the Malach said, Lo Yaakov, ye armor od shemecha. Your name will not be Yaakov anymore. It should not be used. Your name will still be Yaakov, but it shouldn't be used as much. Ki im Yisrael, but Yisrael. Why? Ki sarisa Elokim. You fought with the angel of Esav. Ve'im anoshim, and with people, plural, Lavan and Esav. Vatuchal, and you were able. So growing up, I actually was taught almost an incorrect assumption, which is that Yaakov won the battle. When in reality, Yaakov did not win the battle. It was a stalemate. Yaakov did not win the battle, but rather it was a stalemate. So, what's going on here? The Malach gave a bracha to Yaakov because Vatuchal, he was able to continue battling. He didn't win, but he battled. And the fact that he continued to battle, for that, it was considered a win. Because in the Gullus, which we find ourselves, it's not the winning of the war, but it's the battle that's the most important thing. In this world, we are meant to battle. We are meant to not give up. We are meant to go through difficulties, but we show the greatness of ourselves and the greatness of our Kadosh Baruch Hu when we show that we don't give up. Klal Yisrael does not give up in the Gullus, and that is a win. There's a famous expression, which is to win the war, but you lost the battle. As long as you win the war, it doesn't make a difference if you lost the battle. You win the war and lose the battle. In our Torah, in the way we live our lives, in the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to view the Gullus, it's you lose the war, but you win the battle. Because the battle is winning the war. The battle is winning the war. When you battle, you win. That's what the Eibishter wants to see from us, that we don't give up. So I just wanted to mention that before I start the Vayeshev shiur. Now, like I said, I always say a story, and being that Hanukkah is upon us, I'm going to tell you a magnificent, very emotional story that happened to me when I started teaching in a yeshiva called Binat Chaim at the age of, I think, between 24 and 25. That's when I started teaching there. I got married I was in Beis Medrash, I got married at 21, I was in Kollel for almost 3 years. But I needed to go out and make parnasa. I didn't have the support like many people have. I had different support, Baruch Hashem. I had great family, but I needed to go make a living. I needed to do my job as a married man, and I went out to teach. So I got a job as a Rabbi in a yeshiva, like I said, Binat Chaim, at the age of 24, 25. I was in between, and it was my first teaching job. And within 4 months, my students, Bli Ayin Hara, I believe, became very, very inspirational. And very, very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Actually, that year alone, 18 of my students left the yeshiva to go to a very, very mainstream yeshiva that opened up called Oel Simcha at the time. And Baruch Hashem, all 18 of them today, many of them are B'tei Torah, Rabbeim. So I was Zeicher. But there's one story that I want to discuss. As Chatoy ani asker hayom, I used to smoke cigarettes. That's it. That's all I smoked. But I used to smoke cigarettes, and it's bad enough. And I stopped Baruch Hashem 20 years ago. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, I had a story with him, and the day I left Reb Chaim Kanievsky is not for now. I actually stopped smoking cigarettes cold turkey the day I left him about something. It wasn't even about cigarettes, but maybe I'll say it on the Chanukah Chabura Shir, because it has to do with Chanukah also. Anyway, so I remember 30-something years ago, Marlboro, which was my brand, Marlboro Reds, and this is not an advertisement that anyone should chas v'shalom start smoking, but Marlboro Reds actually did a promotion, and they had catalogs for this promotion. What was the promotion? That on the side of the box of cigarettes, there was something called 5 miles. There was a wording, 5 miles on the side thing, and you would rip off the piece, and you would save them. And they came out with the catalog where you were able to get sleeping bags, duffel bags, hats, glasses, Swiss Army watches, and they made a mistake because they underestimated how many people would actually send in. And it came out that many, many people sent in. So the next catalog, a year or two later, actually was much harder to get items. It was much more expensive for the miles. But Baruch Hashem, I started collecting. And not only that, but my classmates, my students actually knew that I was collecting it. And they felt, we want to help the rabbi out. Chas v'shalom, they didn't smoke because of it. But they would collect in the streets when they would go to down Queens Boulevard, or their uncle smoked a little bit. And they would collect the miles. For Rabbi Walkin, were collecting miles. Word got out that Rabbi Walkin was collecting the miles. And the whole school decided to collect for Rabbi Walkin. So Baruch Hashem, what would take me, many, many, many years to collect, I collected within 3-4 months. I think it was 25,000 miles, which is almost like, I don't even know how much it comes out, but I think it was 2,500 miles, I think it was, right? No, my math is not good. It's never good. But anyway, 25,000 miles was collected for me. And I was able to get from the catalog every single item 3 times over. And I would raffle it off to kids. There was sleeping bags. They were just wonderful, wonderful items. Swiss Army watches. So I got, like I said, 4 items of every single thing. 20 items in this catalog. There was a boy in my class. His name was, one of my students, his name was Mordechai Isaacov. He actually lives in Kew Gardens. He bought my father's and my grandfather's shul, broke it down, built 2 houses on the plot, on the land. But he also dedicated the basement of his house to the shul, big beautiful shul in the basement, and he donated that basement to the Kehillah, to my father's shul. So that's where my father's shul is right now. So this Mordechai Isaacov was my first student that I had, my first student from the first class that I had. Anyway, he also collected miles. Now he knew that I was getting miles from different people. He knew the whole school was raising miles for me, or bringing miles for me. And he also decided he wants something from the catalog. And what did he do? He started collecting. And every day in class he would sit, and I let him do it. He would sit right in front of me, like 2 rows right in front, and he'd take out, but after lunch, during lunch he would do it also. He took out his miles that he collected, and he put them in rubber bands, and he would pile them up, almost like a leprechaun counting his gold. He would sit there, and you should see the love in his eyes of collecting these miles. He would put them in packs and just line them up on the table. Then he would count them again and rubber band them, put them in a baggie, and then in another bag, and then in a brown bag. And then when he finished counting them over and over again, he would put the whole bag in his briefcase, and that's what he was set for the day. Anyway, after 4 or 5 months, like I said, 4 months of collecting, September, October, November, and middle of December, it was Hanukkah time. And a week before, I started telling the boys, my Talmidim, about Hanukkah. And I started telling them very emotional stories about Hanukkah and the great stories of Hanukkah. And like I said, within a few months, my boys were already becoming very religious. They were mamish not religious before, and they were all 18 out of 22 left the yeshiva that year with permission and went to a mainstream yeshiva, almost straight from public school in a way. And I got very emotional telling them stories about different things, especially about Hanukkah. I discussed with them the story with Hannah and her 7 sons, how the children didn't want to eat the chazer, and how the last son said, "Don't worry, Ma, I won't listen to Antiochus." And there was a lot of beautiful stories that I told them. Then I told them about the greatness of the menorah, that a person should try his best to use an oil menorah. Try his best to use an oil menorah and get special olive oil to be mahadir, should be mahadrin. And basically, I said to them, you could be yotze obviously with candles, but you should try your best to be yotze with an oil menorah. Then I mentioned to them that I'm selling menorahs. I wasn't going to make any money on it, but whoever wants to buy a menorah, I will gladly pick it up for them. And at the time, there were oil menorahs for $4 or $5, 30-something years ago. And there was also a very nice menorah that I saw, which was a tall one, for $12.95. And I mentioned that to them also, but I said, don't worry about it. You can use the candle menorah that we're giving out, and that would definitely be, you would definitely be yotze in the mitzvah for you and your family. Now, I will tell you, the Bukharian community, when I first arrived to this yeshiva called Binat Chaim, when I first became a Rabbi in this yeshiva, many of the Bukharians were immigrants, and they were financially very strapped. 2-3 families lived in the same apartment, 3-4 families lived in the same little house that they would put together, and they'd all bring their monies together and pay the rent and the electric and gas, but they were very tight financially, terribly. So I knew that no one's getting the $5 one, and no one's getting for sure the $12 one, but I wanted to offer it at least. Maybe 5 families would get together. Maybe if somebody's so desperate, maybe I'll buy him the $4 or $5 menorah. After class, 2 days before Hanukkah, actually the day before Hanukkah, Mordechai walks over to me and he says, Rebbe, I want an oil menorah. So I said, it costs $5. I wanted to see how much he wanted. I would pay for it, $4 or $5. I'd pay for it. But I wanted to see his desire for it. So he tells me, no, I don't want the $4 or $5 menorah. I want the $12.95 menorah. So I said, how are you going to afford that? How are you going to, you have the money for it? Because I know he didn't. He goes, no, I don't have the money for it. So I was testing him. I said, so how are you going to get this menorah? How are you going to get this menorah? So he looks at me, he says, I have an idea. And he goes into his briefcase, and I'll never forget that moment. He goes into his briefcase, and he takes out the brown bag lovingly, and he walks over to me, and he goes, he collected around 1,200 miles, enough to get 2-3 items in this catalog. And he walks over to me, he says, Rebbe, I'm going to give you my miles, the same miles that he looked at and counted all day, every day, from September as he was building up his miles. He says, Rebbe, I will give you these miles if you can get me that special menorah. So I said to him, Mordechai, you don't need it. I'll get you a smaller menorah and I'll pay for it. I'll get you a smaller menorah and I'll pay for it. He said, no, Rebbe, I want a special menorah because I want my family who are not so religious right now, I want them to bask in the beauty and the holiness of the menorah and the special mitzvah of lighting menorah, mahadrin with olive oil. Rebbe, I'm giving you all my miles. Please, Rebbe, please accept it from me instead of payment. And I want to tell you, I almost cried at that moment, but I controlled myself. And I said, you know what, I will take the miles. And I said, I'll get you the menorah tomorrow. You'll have it in time for Hanukkah. Anyway, I cried the whole way home. And I came home to my wife, and I cried to her, and I could barely tell her over the story of the holiness of this Talmud of mine, that for 4 months, who had no money, was collecting mile after mile, every day counting it. He was willing to give it up, that he could have a more beautiful menorah, and he should be mahadrin and not rely on the candles. And I told my wife, and she got very emotional too. And the only reason why I took it from him was not chas v'shalom to hurt him. I was planning on giving it back to him. I was planning on giving him back the miles. But I said to myself, I'm going to give it back to him on the 3rd day of Hanukkah, because I want him to light the first 2 nights of Hanukkah with the feeling that he gave up something important to light the menorah in the most beautiful way. And I cried on the way to school. And when I saw him the next day, I gave him the menorah. And I got very emotional. I had to leave class. And I said I had to go to the washroom. And I cried over there. It was just such a painful time for me, but very, very special. And the next day, he lit the menorah. That night, he lit the menorah. The next day in class, I said to him, "No, Mordechai, how was it?" He said, "Rabbi, it was the best investment he ever did." He said, "You don't understand. My family was they loved the menorah. They all stood there. We sang and we danced. And instead of lighting with a candle, they had this nice little menorah that you could use oil for. And it was just very special. And I thank you, Rebbe, for that." I waited another night. The next day, the second day of Hanukkah, during the day, I had to give it back to him, and I called him over. I told him what I was planning on doing. I said, "I never intended to take the miles from you, but I wanted you to get the schar and the reward for giving up something important for the mitzvah. Lefum tsar ha'agra. According to the pain is the reward. And I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was looking down at you, and the malachim were looking down on you. And the schus that, you're going to see, you're going to have dairas of children that are b'nei Torah," and he is. His father, his whole family, his whole mishpachah, his cousins, his relatives, all davened by my father, and they're all very, very religious, extremely religious. Extremely religious. His children are learning Torah in Eretz Yisrael. He himself is a big Ben Torah. He knows how to learn unbelievably, and he's a marbitz Torah, and he gives tzedakah for Torah. So it says a person who's nizar, Chazal tell us a person is nizar b'ner Chanukah. He is careful with the ner of Chanukah. He will have children Talmidei Chachamim. Therefore, I could say on him that maybe because he was nizar to do Chanukah menorah the way he should, because on that special lofty level that he wanted to be on, he was zeicha to have children that are b'nei Torah, Baruch Hashem. So that's the story I wanted to mention. Now we're going to get into the Parshas Vayeshev. But the story will lead into the theme of this week's Parsha that I want to discuss. The Parsha begins in Parshas Vayeshev. Vayeshev Yaakov. Yaakov wanted to sojourn. Yaakov wanted to dwell. Yaakov wanted to settle down finally. He had the Petira of Rachel. He had the fights with Esav, the years and years of the fears of Esav, the Lavan running away from his house, not living the last 22 years with his family. He wanted to finally settle down. So Rashi says on this, Bikesh Yaakov leish b'shalva. Yaakov wanted to dwell and rest. Right away, immediately, the story of Yosef came upon him. Right away, the story of Yosef came upon him. So Rashi continues, Tzadikim mevakshim leisha b'shalva. Tzadikim want to sit b'shalva. They want to relax. They want to have later on in life. They want to be able to have menucha. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, Loi dayan l'tzadikim masha masukin lahem l'olam haba. It's not enough what you're going to get in olam haba. Elishim mevakshim leisha b'shalva b'olam haza. You also want to be relaxed a little bit in olam haza? No. Hashem says, no. You also want this olam haza? No. You're going to have what you have in Olam Haba. In this world, it's a world full of trials, tribulations, and difficult situations that a person goes through in his life. So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz has an incredible, like all his incredible sichas. He has a sefer called Sichas Musar, which is pretty much from Tafshin Lamed Aleph. It's printed to Tafshin Lamed Dalet, including Lamed Gimel. Tafshin Lamed Aleph, including Tafshin Lamed Gimel. For a few years, he wrote his Sicha. Somebody wrote it for him, one of his Talmidim. But they put it out in English called Reb Chaim's Discourses. I think that's what it's called, Sichas Musar. Discourses of Musar. And this shtickle is one of, I won't say my favorite, but one of my favorites for sure on the Parsha. So he brings down this Vayeshev Yaakov, he brings down this Rashi, but he asks an unbelievable question. Yaakov Avinu was kuloi Torah. Yaakov was complete Torah. His whole body was Torah. His whole essence was Torah. His whole life is Torah. He's known from the Avos as Torah. Avrohom was Chesed. Yitzchak is Yira. Yaakov is Torah. Yaakov for 14 years did not sleep once at Shem V'Aver. He kept all the Tayag mitzvahs, which he learned it himself in his own being through nature. So Yaakov wanted to relax? Of course not. Yaakov wanted to learn Torah, but he wanted to learn Torah b'menucha. He wanted to learn Torah without outside distractions. He wanted to be able to finally, in old age, to be able to learn without having to battle so hard. So Hashem said, no, Tzaddikim want to have shalva, not to do stupid things, not to go on vacations, which if it's needed is needed, don't get me wrong, but not to just waste time. They want to learn Torah in peace finally. They want to in their old age, not just sit there and play chess and watch TV and go, like I said, on vacations that are not needed. They want to learn Torah. Hashem says, no, you have to learn Torah to the last day of your life, with tsar, with punishment, with difficulties, with tribulations. I don't like the word punishment, but tribulations, because you are going to be able to bring over Maisa Avasim Labanim to your children, that in difficult times like Hanukkah and the Inquisitions and during the Holocaust, where Jews would hide and learn Torah. You have to learn Torah with tsar in order for the Torah to have a special light and kiyum for your children. You are going to get Olam Haba, but in this world there is no rest. There's no rest even for learning Torah and doing mitzvos. You need to have to struggle. And as the Mishnah in Avos, I think it's Perek Hey Mishnah Chavav. Yes, interesting. Chamisha Kum Shetar 5 and Shem Havaya is 26. But Mishnah Hey Perek Hey Mishnah Chavav, it says Lefum Tzara Agra. According to the pain is the reward. And I saw an unbelievable Rambam, like all the unbelievable Rambams. The Rambam brings down that a Rebbe should make it difficult and cause a little inconvenience for his Talmidim when he teaches. He should make it inconvenient. Talk quickly. Let them have to struggle for it so that their Torah will be more pure and they'll benefit more from the fact that they had to work hard for the Torah. Make it not as clear, even though it says a person should teach his Talmidim where it's clear. But that's maybe some of the time. But some of the time you should make it difficult, that they have to be yogeya, they have to work hard, and they have to struggle, and they have to fight for their knowledge and their connection to Torah. So the Fum Tzara Agra, according to reward, according to the pain, is the reward. Now I want to tell you another Mishnah in Avos, Perek Vav, Mishnah Dalet. And I said this Dvar Torah a few weeks ago. I actually spoke in Eretz Yisrael by one of my, I don't want to call him Talmidim because he's much greater in learning than me, he's on a much higher level than me, but I started him off. In his derech of Torah, and then now he's a Gadol B'Yisrael. He wrote many Sfarim, and his family lives 2-3 houses from here. His name is Rabbi Yaakov Skachlis. So he wrote many Sfarim. He's a Dayan in Eretz Yisrael. He's a Gadol Hadar. Really, he's becoming one of the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. So he calls me Rebbe Umayri because he has Hakaras HaTayv. That's really what it's about. But he feels because I got him, on the path, whatever that means, he'll give me. So I spoke in his yeshiva last week and a half ago when I was in Eretz Yisrael, and I brought down this mimer from this Mishnah from Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah begins, like I said, Perek Vav, Mishnah Dalet. And I said this before, so if you heard it from me, Chazar is always a good thing. We say the same Shemona Esrei 3 times a day. We said it already in the morning? No. It's new every time. So Mishnah says like this, Kachi darka shel Torah. This is the way of learning Torah. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz brings it down. This is the way of learning Torah. Reb Chaim somewhere else, not over here, but I saw it, I remember years ago in a different Sikha. He says, it doesn't say Kachi darka shel Torah me'eles. This is a good way to learn Torah, a uplifting way to learn Torah, a ma'uladik way of learning Torah. No, the Mishnah says, Kach hi darka shel Torah. This is the only way to really, really acquire and learn Torah. The highest level, but this is the way to do it. Pas b'melech teichel, bread in salt water. Mayim bamsura tishta, drawn water, which means water has to be with measured water. Measured water. You can't have as much water as you want if you want to really get to the highest of levels. You need to even be careful how much water you drink, not to drink more than is necessary, what you need. And you have to sleep on the floor. This is wild. That means if I don't sleep on the floor, I'm not yotza, I'm not getting close to the way the Torah should be. To a certain degree, the more you suffer, the more you acquire. But that's not what he says. He says this is the way. So maybe in this generation it means less luxuries, and you speak to your rabbi what this Mishnah means, because the Mishnah does say this. I did not make up any words here. This is straight from the Mishnah. So you got to figure out what that means. That means everyone has to lay on the floor? No, but I'll tell you an amazing story that I heard. Somebody was at my Shabbos table and said to me that there's a balabas in Lawrence who's a very wealthy guy. I think he said he's very wealthy. It's not a geya, but he said he's a very wealthy guy, luxurious guy who has a beautiful house. And ever since October 7th, when Hamas did the terrible crimes that they did, He only sleeps on the floor and he does not sleep on his bed. It's been 50-something days, I don't know, 55, 57 days. He has not slept in a bed in the 57 days, 55, 40, 53 days at the time. He has not slept in a bed. He has not slept in a bed. So that's very powerful, very, very powerful. Why? Because Ima Anochi B'tzara, we want to feel, he wants to feel what Klal Yisrael is going through. He took away a little luxury from himself. I will tell you, Rabbi Vigna Miller, I don't know how many years he did this, but it was definitely over 40, 50 years. Never slept on a bed for at least 40, 50 years. I think it's more than 50, maybe 70 years. I remember what I was told. Since he was 30 or something, I don't know, 60 years maybe. He never slept on a bed, but he would sleep with a sheet on a board, a wooden board, that he shouldn't sleep a good night's sleep because the Churban Beis HaMikdash. I mean, these are extremes, holy extremes. I don't call them extremes, I call them holiness. But everyone in his own way could think about what he has to do to be memayet in certain luxuries. Maybe have one steak instead of two steaks. Maybe order, I don't know, one main dish in Dolma or whatever you go eat, which is wonderful places. But be memayet a little bit. Now let's get to the rest of the Mishnah. Remember again, Pas Melech Tochel, Mayim Bam Surah Tish Tava Alerts Tishin. Then I made a diak. I think it's a proper diak. The means and also. The means and also. And also live a life of suffering, which means that the other three are not even suffering. Eating bread and salt water, measured water, you can't have as much as you want, and sleeping on the floor, that's not even suffering, that's regular. Also live a life of suffering. Uva Torah ata amel. Now, should a person actually look for suffering? It's a schus to suffer. It is a schus to suffer, believe it or not. The Hashem, Asher Hashem, Oyev, whoever Hashem loves, miyaser, he gives musar. He gives him punishments. He gives him not punishments, but he gives him tribulations. The one that Hashem loves, Hashem challenges, Hashem tests, Hashem hits in a way where he challenges him, that he could raise himself different levels. And then it says, Ashrecha v'tovlach, Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, it's good for you in this world, v'tovlach ba'olam haba, and it's also good for you. Also good for you in the next world. It's good for you in this world, and also good for you in the next world. So Reb Gershon Edelstein Zatzal made an unbelievable dig on this. Ashrecha ba'olam hazeh, it's good for you in this world. And we're going to get to it. Well, how can it be good for you if you're living a life of suffering? If you have Mayim Bam Surah, Pas Melech, right? Alarz Tishon. How is it good for you? Ashrecha, it's good for you in this world, righteous for you in this world. V'tovlach, and it's also good for you on Olam Haba. So like I said, Reb Gershon Edelstein said that it's good for you in this world. What do you need more than that? You don't need more than that. No, Hashem says to you, you want more. Klal Yisrael, you want dessert? You want dessert? V'tovlach b'olam haba. You'll also get Olam Haba. But it's good for you in this world. How could that be good for you? And they once asked Reb Aaron Kotler, Yisachar Zevulun. Yisachar is the Torah. Zevulun were the people that support Torah. And so somebody once asked them, are they truly equal? Are they equal? Are they shutfin, equal partners, 50-50? That the person, the Kolul guy, the Talmid Chacham, the Tzaddik, that kept away from every Dover Usser, that kept away from his taivas, not that the rich guy doesn't, but the guy that sat and learned Torah with difficulty. And then there's another guy who writes out a check, and then, lives his life. Beautiful stuff, wonderful stuff. They're equal, right? They asked him that. So you know what he said? Maybe they're equal. You know what? Let's say they're equal. Let's say the schar will be the equal. But Olam Hazeh, this world, only Yisachar gets. Only Yisachar has, which means the one who learns Torah with suffering, he gets this world. Wow, that's not getting this world. It says V'chai Yitzar, which means suffering. How do you get this world? How can you, if it's suffering, then you're not enjoying yourself. If you're suffering, you're not enjoying yourself. So how can you say? So, pshat is that when you suffer for Torah, you get such a kinyan ha-Torah, it becomes part of your neshama, it becomes part of you, that the high that you get from learning Torah like that is more powerful than the suffering you get from the Olam Hazeh that you're lacking. Again, the closeness to Hashem, the loftiness that you get from learning Torah with suffering makes you happier than the feeling of the suffering of your physical lack of pleasure that you have. And I want to tell you, Rabbi Akiva was being ripped apart his body Rabbi Akiva's body was being ripped apart, and he was laughing and happy and smiling. And his Talmidim said, Rabbi, how can you be happy when you're suffering? So he says, Kol Yoma Yitzdarti al Pasuk Zeh. I always was worried about the Pasuk in Shema, that even if he takes Afilu Notelas Nafshecha, even if he takes your Neshama, and now that I could get this mitzvah, that I'm able to finally do this thing that I was all my life hoping to give up my life for, I shouldn't be happy. So which means the happiness of getting close to Hashem through what he was doing overrode the suffering that he was having physically. And you know what? You see from the Chayalim, and you see from those Israeli parents that send their sons, and they're smiling, and they're happy, and the Chayalim are joy. They know they're in a danger zone. They know at any moment they can get shot, killed, chas v'shalom. Hashem should watch over them. But there's a joy in doing the will of the people, doing the will of Hashem, protecting Am Yisrael, protecting Klal Yisrael, that overrides the fear of what can happen to them physically. We're talking about death. Chai Yitzar is not death. Paspa Melech is not death. Mayim Bamsura is not death. Al Arutz Tishon is not death. These people are going knowing they can get shot, leaving their parents alone. Their parents will suffer. No. There's a certain Kedusha that you get when you're doing Ratzon Hashem, which overrides the pain you have in this world. And that's an unbelievable lesson. That's an unbelievable lesson. So that's one thing I wanted to mention on the Parsha. Another thing I want to mention on the Parsha, we're late. I have so much to say. I'm going to save one of the things which is very, very special. I'm going to save it for when we get to the Parsha of Miketz Vayigash, because I can really say it over there, because it's all three. It's a theme in all the Parshios and Bereshis with our Avos. So I'm going to leave that, but I'm going to mention a very important thing that Rav Shmuel Birnbaum, and I said this twice already, but I'm going to say it again because it fits in. It's happened in this week's Parsha. Now we know the story with Yosef, and we know the story with Potipharah's wife, and we know the story how Yosef almost fell, but he saw Dugmasei Shel Aviv, he saw his father's face, and he controlled himself. But let me go back a little bit. This woman tried to get Yosef every single day for a year. Every single day for a year she tried to get him. He was away from his father. He was away from his brothers. He was in a tumadika place. Mitzrayim was the worst. The unholiness of Mitzrayim was worldly known. People came to Mitzrayim to do bad things. People would come to Mitzrayim for witchcraft, for znus. Every bad thing came out of the greatness of Mitzrayim. And Yosef is there by himself, away from the Beis Medrash, away from the holiness of his father, away from his Rebbe. His father is his Rebbe. Away from all of this. You know what it is to cut a source of a Talmud from a Rebbe? The Gemara says that a Talmud that goes to Gullus, the Rebbe has to go with him. If a Talmud killed by accident and he has to go to the Arei Miklat, a Rebbe must go with him because a Rebbe is the life force of this person. Ad Kedei Kach, that he has to go to Gullus with him. Yet Yosef was Yosef's Talmud, Rebbe, Yosef's greatest Rebbe, and his Rebbe was Yaakov. And here he is cut away from that life force, and he's in the most evil place, shunned by his brothers, shunned by the family, not even knowing if they think about him, if they remember him, if they know him. And here he is in the most tumadika place, being seduced, Kaviocha, I don't want to say that lashon, by an evil woman every single day. And the beauty of Yosef was universal. It says Yosef never sinned once in Mitzrayim, not even once. Not only that, there's an unbelievable vart that I once said over about my brother at his yard site. I spoke at one of the yard sites. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe last year, I don't remember. But I spoke about why is it that a legacy doesn't end. Legacies don't end. That's why it's called a legacy. Somebody leaves over a legacy, not just financially, his kavod, right? Kilo v'moso yikach hakol. The Vilna Gaon says, Kilo v'moso yikach hakol. After the shir, I'll answer all questions. Kilo v'moso yikach hakol. A person, the Vilna Gaon learns that a person doesn't take everything with him. Not talking about the finances or the richness, right? Li'ered acharav kvodo. His kavod doesn't go down with him. It doesn't go to the grave. Vilna Gaon learns the opposite. L'yered acharav kavodo, his honor, his legacy, kvodo, what's really kavod doesn't go down. So the question is, Yosef was away 22 years. Yosef was away from his father 20-something years, 22 years. And for all the years he was away, his father could not get over the loss. He lost Ruach HaKodesh. He wasn't himself. He was always in sackcloth. He was mourning Yosef. How could that be? Yaakov, Amunah, B'tachon. Hashem did this, Hashem has a plan. Hashem did this, Hashem has a plan. So obviously, how could it be that Yaakov would sit in Avelis for 20-something years? He's also taking away, it says he lost his Ruach HaKodesh. He lost his Ruach HaKodesh. And what happens? He's not giving the Torah over to the highest level to his children, to the future generations, to Am Yisrael is going to lose out because he's losing Ruach HaKodesh. Yaakov Avinu not teaching the Torah in the highest levels, is the rest of Klal Yisrael for generations is losing out. How could it be he didn't forget? How could it be he didn't forget? We know that Hashem causes shikha as a gift, that a person can move on a little bit, to a certain degree move on, and he can still have a life. He loses a child, chas v'shalom, a parent, whatever it is, a wife, a husband, a child, whatever it is you lose. Hashem causes a certain amount of shikha as a matana that a person could live on, because some people can't live on. So Hashem causes them to have a little bit. They always remember, they'll always think. How could it be that Yaakov never got over it, especially Amunah B'tachon? So I forgot who said it over, I think it was Sternbach. He says over that when there's a personal loss, Hashem causes shikha. When somebody loses something personally, you have shikha. But when a communal group loses somebody important and someone who's a Rav and somebody who is a future seminator of Torah, he dies, there's no forgetting something like that. And you see people remember their Rabbeim of Europe, and the Rabbeim of Europe remember their Rabbeim, and people when they talk about their Rabbeim from generations earlier, you see they're in a different world when they discuss their Rabbeim, because you don't forget someone that's the Klal needed, someone communal. And that's why I brought up my brother, because his loss is never going to be filled because of the greatness of what he was going to always give, and you don't forget greatness like that. But Yosef was forgotten. He was forgotten. Yet he didn't give in to this woman's evil plans. So how does Hashem reward him? That same day he gets thrown into prison. Now I want to make a yeshivish joke. I have to make it, but it says that he left his jacket, at the house. He tried to grab it, and he left his jacket there, and he ran out. And she saw that he left his jacket, so she complained on him. So I'm going to make a joke a little bit. You see, a yeshiva bacher should never leave the house without a jacket. You can't walk out the house. See, because he ran out without a jacket, this happened. Anyway, just a side joke. But let's get more back to what the word is here. How does Hashem reward him? He throws him into prison that same day. That's a reward. That's a reward for overcoming one of the greatest challenges that a human being can overcome, that he's called tzaddik because of that. Because of that, he's called tzaddik. Because of that, he's called tzaddik. And like I was going to tell you before, that Yaakov, when he comes down to Mitzrayim, he tells Yosef like this. He says, Amusa hapam, I can die this time. Now that I've seen your face, that you're still living. I can die now that I see you're still living. So the question on this pasuk is, it's extra lashon, you would think. Why? It doesn't have to say, now that I've seen your face, that you're still living. All it has to say is, Amusa hapam, I can die. That you're still living. What does the face have to do with anything? Now that I see your face, that you're still living. So I saw an unbelievable shot on that if Yosef would have sinned even minutely with a woman or something like that, or even looking, it says, he would never be able to look his father in the face. Therefore, Yaakov says, I could die knowing spiritually. I can die now. Before I died emotionally and physically in a way. But now I can die spiritually, that I was able to look you in the face. You saw me face to face. That you're still living spiritually. So Yosef never sinned. And this is how Hashem rewards him, throwing him into prison. We'll end with this. Shmuel Birnbaum says an incredible thing. Like all the things that he was my Rabbi, he was my Rosh Yeshiva, and Nebuch from all the yeshivas I've been to. I've been to all the yeshivas. It's quicker for me to mention the yeshivas I didn't go to. But anyway, he says like this of Shmuel Birnbaum. He says that the greatest matana that Hashem did for Yosef was that he threw him into prison. And he uses the lashon. I remember in Yiddish he said, "Nish yede'ena is zoichet to nisyonis." Not everyone merits to be challenged. Not everyone merits to be challenged. Those that Hashem loves, He challenges so they can get rewarded. Suffering is a virtue. Yosef HaTzadik, because he overcame the story with Eshes Potiphar, he merited to be challenged again. Hashem said, because you overcame this, that we're going to the next level. Kaviyachol. When people play video games and they finish the first board, we're going to the harder board and the harder board. And that's what you hope in video games, to get to the harder board, the next board. Then it gets harder and harder. Because the challenges is what makes you feel good when you win a game. In life, when Hashem challenges a person, it's a gift because it raises him to the next level. It makes him a hero. It makes him special. It makes him close to Hashem. Therefore, Yosef HaTzadik was Zoicha. He merited to have more challenges. And we must learn from this. Challenges are gifts from Hashem, whether you understand it. Work on it. Work on it. I am working on it. Whenever I have challenges in my life, I actually, many times, most of the time now, I lift myself up, Baruch Hashem, and I say, this is what Hashem wants. He's testing me. He's challenging me. He obviously trusts in me. He believes that I finished the first board, the second board, and so I'm ready for the next board. Kaviyachal. I'm ready for the next challenge, which gets you closer to Hashem. And not only do you get rewarded for it in the next world, but you get rewarded by being close to Hashem in this world. Challenges, nisim, a nes, right? A miracle comes from the word nisiyah, to lift. When a person has a nisayon, comes from the word nes. Nisayon comes from the word nes. A challenge comes from the word nes, and the word nes means to uplift. Because your challenges in life uplift you. And you must remember that when you have difficult times in your life and you say to Hashem, Hashem, thank you for the challenges. Thank you for the difficulties. Thank you that you trust in me. Thanks that you think I'm a warrior that can handle it, that I can go to the highest board of the game, as we call it. I'm ready for the top of the line board. I'm ready for the second edition of this game. I'm ready to play the highest level. I put it right away on Supreme or whatever you call it. Hashem trusts in you, but don't make Hashem lose trust by failing. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbos. Thank you very much. You can also give it also. Thank you all, and we'll see each other, Mr. Hashem. Tomorrow we're going to have the Hanukkah. We're going to have the one on Hanukkah. Thank you so much. Kol Tov.